Hello, this is Team 8's Virtual Water Project, and our team includes Malin Hath, Leah Vermeulen, Ariana Taylor, and Sienna Peters. Starting with a brief introduction on virtual water, as we learned in class, virtual water is the water that's embedded in a resource that can be both exported and imported through trade. And this concept is important because by understanding and having awareness of this, countries can mitigate water disparities and designate certain countries to produce products that require less water if they have water scarcity, or vice versa for countries that have a water abundance. Um, and then the image on the left of the slide just displays the flow of virtual water throughout the globe and between several countries. So, for our specific product, we'll be talking about lumber and the trade of lumber between Canada and the US. So, Canada is actually the second largest lumber exporter in the world. This means that Canada is really important to the lumber industry in general. And US is the number one buyer of Canadian lumber. And in 2022, 68% of Canadian lumber exports went to just the US. This goes to show that Canadian lumber is really important to the US consumption of lumber, whether it's as is or in the form of other products. And then lumber has been a key trade good under NAFTA and the USMCA agreements. This just means that lumber is kind of a key to keeping peace in North American countries and keeping a steady trade flow between them.
Next, we have water use in Canadian forestry. First is green water. That is basically rainwater that trees soak up as they grow. Trees rely completely on rainfall for things like photosynthesis and transpiration, so green water is really the starting point of lumber's virtual water footprint, even before any processing takes place. Next up is blue water. That's the fresh water we pull from sources like rivers and underground aquifers. In forestry, it is used for things like debarking logs, sawmilling, making pulp, and treating wood. Then we have recycling and treatment of water, which is very important. In fact, almost 90% of the water used in Canadian forestry operations gets captured, treated, and released back into the environment, usually close to the same quality it was to begin with. That kind of recycling helps keep the overall blue water footprint pretty low. Forestry practices also help manage water, for example, riparian buffers, which are strips of trees left untouched along rivers and lakes, act as natural filters. They help stop sediment, chemicals, and erosion from getting into the water. Healthier reparation zones mean cleaner water for both the environment and forestry use. Wetlands play a big role too. Forest wetlands work like natural water filters. They trap pollution, soak up nutrients, and slow down runoff. Keeping these wetlands intact improves overall watershed health, keeps the water clean, and reduces the need for man made water treatment in forestry.
So when we look at the implications for the lumber industry in the US and Canada, we see that Canada exports a lot of lumber to the US, and so it's also exporting its water resources. But with increasing water stresses from things like droughts that are happening in Canada or wildfires, the availability of exported water is under pressure. And so the US is becoming dependent on foreign water through imports, and it's creating a virtual water dependency. Um, and something where water availability stress and the climate adaptation needs go hand in hand, because climate change is reducing the water availability, which damages forestry infrastructure, and it causes an increasing cost for the production of this. And there's also water quality concerns when you look at the sedimentation, runoff, or chemicals that are being used to grow these certain um, lumber forests. And so that's causing an affected water supply in general, because there can be a runoff of the chemicals into nearby streams and rivers or lakes that contaminates the water sources for just the people that are living in that area. And so in Canada, they aren't necessarily receiving there's limited benefits for virtual water trade, but they're also bearing a lot of ecological costs. Yeah.
Finally, to wrap up, I'm going to go over a couple of key takeaways. First, the lumber trade between Canada and the US isn't just about wood, it is about virtual water. Every piece of lumber carries with it the water used to grow the trees, and that flow, the virtual water across the border, is massive. Second, Canada is essentially bearing the water cost of supplying the United States construction industry. This means that Canada's ecosystem and water resources are carrying much of the environmental load. Third, how we manage our forest and water directly affects the long term sustainability of this trade. We need to make sure that coordinated policies are smart. And finally, this is a shared issue. The environmental responsibilities tied to this trade connect between both countries. Canada and the US need to work together to ensure a balanced and suitable future. Thank you for joining us today.